So, last week we were here, we were talking about the University of Istanbul and stayed until year around 1200 when the Latin people for crusade invaded Istanbul and looted. Between 1204 and 1453, Istanbul was almost deserted. It was poor. People were dispersed. Some scholars went to Italy, Europe. Some scholars are dead. So when we came to 1453, the population of Istanbul was like 1/5 or 1/6, 7th of its original population before 1204. So it was a bad situation in Byzantine Empire. It wasn't an empire anyway at that time. When Fatih Sultan Mehmet was conquering. So it was a difficult time for Istanbul, for Byzantium. Then, we remember that they have some special they have some special stuff on top of old Greek knowledge on mathematics, physics, medicine. For example, there was a Greek fire, which was very famous in Istanbul's occupation, conquer. And also, there were some scholars had some effect on Renaissance and humanism later. Interestingly, the relation between Byzantium and Islamic people were much better than we thought. Although there was a fight, there were a lot of interaction, cultural interaction, trade, business interaction. It was like maybe today's Ukraine and Russia. So Ukraine and Russia is fighting, but yet, I mean, they share a lot of things and knowledge. So initially, Byzantine Empire provided medieval Islamic world with ancient early medieval Greek texts. So ancient Greek texts were transferred through Byzantine Empire to Islamic scholars in early times, like 800, 900, 1000, etc. and later. There were a lot of translations, and those translations are usually done by people who both speak Arabic and Latin, because those texts were Latin and Greek. One of the scholars recently said, if I'm correct, those people who speak both Arabic and Latin, because they were Christians, were usually Assyrians of Turkey, Suryani. So they were living in Anatolia. They were Arabs, but they were also Christians. So being Christian makes you more closer to the Byzantium and Christianity. So you also learn Latin because of the Bible. Then you realize that you can translate other texts like scientific books, etc. So you do translations from Latin to Arabic. Then a lot of other books also translated from Arabic to Greek. So there was there was an interaction in both ways, not only one-way translation. There was also interaction in both ways. The Turkish people were making trade with Byzantium, and they were also doing some fighting for the as mercenaries for fighting for the Byzantium. So Byzantium army also had some Islamic soldiers, Muslim soldiers, and Turkish soldiers, because it was a different state, and in Anatolia there was not a very big empire. So before Ottomans, so some Turkish presence was also observed in Byzantium. For example, during the occupation of the siege of Istanbul by Fatih Sultan Mehmed, there was a Turkish prince who was on the side of the Byzantium fighting against Fatih Sultan Mehmed. Do you know who he is? Just check. Huh? Cem değil. Bakarak değil, cep telefonundan bakacaksınız. Bana bakarak bir şey öğrenemezsiniz. Who was the prince against Fatih Sultan Mehmed during siege of Constantinople? İnteraktif ders yapıyoruz. Kim?
Orhan.
Yeah. Şehzade Orhan, Çelebi Orhan. So Çelebi Orhan and his soldiers were fighting against Fatih Sultan Mehmed. I think the Byzantium thought that if they lose, or if they can endure, maybe they can put Orhan instead of Fatih, so that the roles will be opposite. But he was too weak. His army was too weak, so he couldn't do it. So Byzantine science played an important role in not only transmitting ancient Greek knowledge to Western Europe and Islamic world, but also transmitting Arabic knowledge to Western Europe. So it was an intermediary between Arabic world and European. Some historians suspect that Copernicus or another European author had access to Arabic astronomical text, resulting in the transmission of L2C couple, an astronomical method developed by L2C, later appeared in the work of the Copernicus. So some speculate that Copernicus took some knowledge from L2C. Scientists also became familiar with the Sasani and the Indian astronomy through Arabic works. So Eastern knowledge is transmitted to the West through the Byzantium, through Istanbul. Well, when we say Byzantium, it is Istanbul. So there wasn't any big city. Then I usually ask this in exam. There was two siege and conquer of Istanbul. One, 1204, Latin invasion. Second, 1453, Turkish invasion. In the Latin invasion, Istanbul was destroyed. Population reduced a lot. In 1453, the population changed. That wasn't that much, although there was some. But scholars left. So rich people and scholars left to Italy. When they leave to Italy, they brought books with them, and they brought knowledge with them and culture. Therefore, they fueled, not started, but they fueled the Renaissance in that area in Italy. Although later advances in Renaissance happened in France and Germany, it originated from Italy. Okay, because Italy was a big trade zone, an early trade place where people can accumulate wealth and knowledge, rather than Germany, which was kind of poor, and also France, agricultural land, and Spain. When was the Hazreti Muhammed's death? Kaç? 632. So around 80 years later, we see Islamic scholars in Arabic region, well, not in Arabic region, in Iraq and Iran and Turkish regions. Even that time, the places like Mecca, Medina, and Jeddah, Riyadh, whatever, they were probably villages at that time. They didn't have science. They didn't have much people thinking about big things. The science was already available and in place in Baghdad, in Egypt, and in Iran. So it flourished in those regions rather than Saudi Arabia's today. One guy was Ibn Hayyan, first chemist known to produce sulfuric acid, as well as many other chemicals and instruments. Glass industry was quite developed in Arab people, so they were producing glasses and they were exporting it to Europe, Arabic glass. The Uluburun ship, currently in Bodrum Museum, was carrying glass from Eastern Mediterranean to probably to Greece or some western part. So there were a lot of glass trade. That glass wasn't window glass, of course, other types of glassware. We didn't have glasses in windows in older times. Nitric acid and other chemical compounds were invented by him. Khwarizmi, we have the picture of him in the lab, developed the calculus of resolution and juxtaposition, more briefly, algebra. So inventor of the algebra was Khwarizmi. Again, these are semi-Turkish, semi-Iranian people. Actually, they are Turkish, mostly, in today's Iran and Khorasan. But Iranian people say he was Iranian. Turkish people say he was Turkish. Afghan people say they were Afghani. So everyone is trying to get him. El-Kindi, distillation of wine. So making perfumes. Al-Kindi has book of chemistry, and those books were handwritten, as you can see on the right. So those books were preserved, original books. Some of them are not available, but some of them are available. For example, we see some scientists wrote 30 books, only 2 of them is available. The remaining 28 is lost. So that kind of numbers are around. He was the first major writer on optics after antiquity, classic, until after Greek time. Roger Bacon placed him in the first rank after Ptolemy as a writer on the optics. So a lot of time difference between Roman time, between 0 and 800. So it's 800 years of darkness. Cryptographic messages containing the oldest known decryption and cryptanalysis by frequency analysis. So cryptology was also studied by Al-Kindi. Yeah, as I said, it is known that he wrote at least 260 books by hand. It's basically not books, probably. What happens is it is notebooks for studying, careful studying notebook. Then we consider it as books. So since there was no print, it was handwriting of certain pages and binding it. 32 books on geometry, 22 books for medicine and philosophy, logic 9 books, physics 12 books. Although many of the books were lost, some of them are survived in the form of Latin translations, because there were translations at that time. So those translations survived. Original is lost. Some of them are rediscovered in original manuscript. 24 of his lost works were located in the mid-20th century in a Turkish library. So, recent finding. Al-Kindi's work. So, if you are interested, you can reach to this work. It's a good thing. You can reach to this work and study on it. Obviously, there will be a lot of errors, misunderstandings, but it is history, so you will feel how they feel. With the increasing availability of the artificial intelligence tools, these things can be studied in much deeper way today for analysis. So using an artificial intelligence, you can analyze those books and understand, compare. So you may discover something. Those kind of discoveries are for knowledge, not for developing a banking application for certain banks. So it is only for the knowledge, sake of the knowledge. Then we are moving into the 9th century. Around up until 1100, Islamic science was flourishing. El-Razi, for example, was also working on chemistry. Book of Secret of Secrets. He has a Book of Secret of Secrets. he said when they are trying to find a place for Baghdad hospital, he hung places of fresh meat in different parts of the city, and he took the location where the meat took the longest to get bad because it was probably dry and cold. So that was the place he chose. So an experimental method was used to find the location of the hospital. That method is not even done today. Today, we only look at the price of the area. So if the price is suitable, they build a hospital. Or if the area belongs to some friend, then they buy it to make more money, to make the hospital. Also, he advocated that the patients not to be told their real condition, so their fear of despair do not affect the healing process. So he suggested that we can lie to patients to make their psychology better for healing. Also, he has some formulas on soap and glycerin and other things, and etc. Tabit now. Tabit was also interesting. Again, in Baghdad. Baghdad was the center. Discovered a theorem where pairs of amicable numbers to be found. So number theory related things. Tabit was born in Haran. Okay. Those were the books. Then arithmetic. Baghdad was the legacy of Babylonians. So base 60 arithmetic was available already. So they developed on it. They developed Arabic numerals instead of Roman numbers, which is common to Indian numeral system as well. So Indian Arabic numeral system is now accepted in the world. And if we carefully name the symbols we use for numbers, today we say that Arabic numerals for digits from 0 to 9 are named as Arabic numerals as standard today. So it is not an historic issue. Today also they are named as Arabic numerals. Roman numerals and Arabic numerals. Then there are other people, just name them. Let's name them. El-Mesudi, El-Uklisi, El-Buzjani, El-Baghdadi. These people were mathematicians and chemists who added additional things on top of their previous masters. Then Ömer Hayyam. Now we just passed year 1000. Persian Turkish mathematician who knows if he is Persian or Turkish or both. He gave the complete classification of cubic equations with geometric solutions found by means of intersecting conic sections. So relatively complex cubic equations are x cube, ax cube plus bx square plus cx plus d. So solution of that. Extracted roots using the decimal system, using Indian numeral system. He also had a commentary on the difficulties concerning the Euclid's elements in his Risale. So he elaborated on Euclid's Elements book. But some of them work he's done is lost. In 1074, Malazgirt, just after Malazgirt war, right? Turks coming into Anatolia. Ömer Hayyam was commissioned by Sultan Melik Shah to build an observatory in Isfahan, Iran, to reform Persian calendar. To make a calendar, make an observatory. So Ömer must have known the formula for the rektörlük. Efendim. Evet. Mail atarsanız şu an dersteyim. Ona bakarım. Tamam, kolay gelsin. Binomial expansion was also studied. Euclid's elements studied. And also he was a philosopher at the same time. As we go through 12th century, El-Idrisi, El-Samawi, El-Tusi, important, were around, but these are probably the last people of Islamic science. El-Farisi, El-Jazari. El-Jazari was engineer, not scientist. Later, there was an Ulu Bey in Uzbekistan. In Anatolia, we have the early Ottoman Empire. But just on the other side of Iran, there was a big Turkish culture and civilization. One of them is Samarkand and Ulu Bey. Ulu Bey was Sultan. But then he was assassinated later because he was not a good Sultan, not very powerful, because probably he was so good behaving, and then he was killed. Ulu Bey Observatory was very interesting. If you go to Uzbekistan today, which I believe we should all go one day, Ulu Bey Observatory is very interesting. Also, you can watch the videos. Later, El-Kashi, 1429, again, finding roots by Horner method. Horner algoritması var ya, Horner metoduyla kök bulma. Hatırlıyor musunuz? Göstermediler mi lisede size Horner metodunu? Ha? Aa. Yo, Horner metodu. Böyle çizgi çekiyorsun, tablo yapıyorsun, katsayıları yazıyorsun. Bunları toplayıp bir daha yazıyorsun, bir daha yazıyorsun. En altta çıkanlar şey oluyor, kökler oluyor falan, öyle bir şey. Unuttum ben de şimdi. Polinom kökü bulmak için. Böle böle gidiyorsun. Kendi kendine bölerek gidiyorsun, öyle bir şey. Simplified. Then Ibn Mesud, El-Kasadi, these are also the late ones. There is another one, only one, Muhammed Bekir Yazdi. And that's it. No more science. The problem is, some Islamic scholars said it is not good to deal with science. It is against the Sharia law around 1100. So those even work on science and philosophy did it by going against the general idea, the general public idea, and some of them were killed as well. So what we see is after 1200, the progress in Islamic science has been stopped. After 12th century, after 1100 and 1200, before the Renaissance in Europe, partly due to Mongol conquest and partly due to the change in Islamic perception, libraries were destroyed, hospitals were destroyed in Baghdad, for example. Most people blame Mongol conquest for the stopping, but actually it was a slow process. As Islamic priests, imams, get more powerful, as they get more powerful, they probably saw the philosophers and the other guys like Al-Tusi, etc., as a threat to their power. So it was basically a power conflict between imams and the philosophers, similar to what happened in the West. Yeah, the end of the Islamic Golden Age ends with the Abbasi Khalifa in 1258. That's basically 1258 is the day. The wars were very hard. People were dying. They invade a city and kill all the people. So the perception of human life was different than today. Anybody can easily die or get killed, and you as a person has no significant value. Society and ideals have more values. Today's value of human is probably the product of last 100 years. Before 100 years, you didn't have any value, so you didn't feel anything. This was, again, another picture of Istanbul. This place is the place of Gülhane Parkı on the right side and Topkapı Palace. There wasn't a Topkapı Palace. Okay. Ayasofya is on the right side. And next to Ayasofya, Sultanahmet was here, right? Sultanahmet Cami. And Topkapı Palace was here, the Forum de Constant. This is the Çemberli Taş. And this part is Gülhane Parkı of today. This was Forum de Constantine. This was a interesting Four Seasons Hotel, which is interesting. This was an old building, one of the old buildings, and used as prison in Ottoman time. So renovated many times. Somewhere here. Again, there was a palace here. This palace was original form, and the picture taken in late Ottoman time, like in First World War, this was the case. Today it was like this. There is a road in front. Okay, so let me move on. Do you have any questions? Now, it becomes interesting now. We will be trying to understand how it shifted to Europe from Islamic time. There were a lot of Islamic scholars. Europe was in very bad situation. Christianity was so hard on people. People were poor. Industrial revolution didn't happen. There was an agriculture, but the climate wasn't as good as Mesopotamia, so farming was difficult. Okay, food was scarce, and also church was very strong on the people. It was a difficult time. Around before the people were pagan, so they weren't Christian either. Around 11th century, most Europe was Christian. Borders were present between kingdoms. Technological developments and agricultural innovations were made, increasing food supply and population. So after year 1000, basically, Europe started to develop. Before 1000, it was very bad. Not in Roman times. Roman civilization is something different. So between 0 and 1000, it was very difficult. Classical Greek texts were translated from Arabic to Greek into Latin, stimulating scientific discussion in Western Europe. But it was still very primitive. Intellectual revitalization, rebirth of Western Europe started with the birth of medieval universities in the 12th century. Contact with the Byzantine Empire and with Islamic world during Crusades allowed Latin Europe to access scientific Greek and Arabic texts because they were looting things, whatever they can find, books, jewelries, everything were taken to Europe. European scholars had access to translation programs of Toledo, who sponsored the 12th century Toledo School of Translators from Arabic to Latin. Spain was conquered by Arabs sometime, and there was an interaction, and in Spain there were people who speak Arabic and Spanish at the same time, and the Latin. So there was a local king in Toledo who provided support for the translation, and they established, actually I have seen it, they established a place called Toledo School of Translators. They didn't put a name to the entrance. It is named after. We name it as Toledo School of Translators. It was basically a cathedral. So a group of scholars who worked together in the city of Toledo during 12th and 13th centuries to translate many of the philosophical and scientific works from Arabic to Latin. Translation Center. They were interested. There were a lot of free time because they were religious people. People were paying. So they were intelligent and they started translating. Those translations are, some of the translations are like this: Euclid's Elements, Meteorology, Al-Khwarizmi's Algebra, Ptolemy's Almagest, Aristotle's works, Al-Kindi's Optics, Farabi's Sciences, El-Razi, Tabit. So a lot of Arabic texts were translated into Latin. Also, probably all Greek too. Many more. Some translators would learn Arabic in order to study these texts directly. So some of them also learned Arabic in order to understand what was inside. That started European universities. The European universities aided materially in the translation and propagation of these texts and started a new infrastructure that was needed for scientific communities. So book and reading is the core of scientific progress and philosophical progress. Otherwise, people will stay as they are. In fact, European university put many works about the natural world and study nature at the center of its curriculum, with the result that medieval university laid far greater emphasis on science than does its modern counterpart. So medieval university is more like nature, science, etc., not technology. So it's more science, world, etc. There was also Bible. So Bible is explaining the world, science is explaining the world. So that's for understanding. At the end, you will be a person who understands the nature. Many things were prohibited. In classical antiquity, Greek and Roman taboos had meant that dissection was banned. So working on human body, dead human body, is prohibited. In Middle Ages, medical teachers and students at Bologna began to open human bodies, as opposed to banning, produced the first known anatomy textbook based on human dissection. So around 1200s and 1300s, people started to analyze human body by cutting it. Then they started to make ships bigger. They were able to travel more, by land and by the sea. Marco Polo was by the earth. He went to Chinese and Eastern route. Indian and Chinese culture were introduced through, for example, Marco Polo. Pax Mongolica means after the Mongol invasion. Mongols were made a peace with Europeans, and then people started to travel and make trade. People were bringing money to the church, and church monks were trying to do something for the god. They probably, the first thing was build a church. When they have a church, build a next one, build a bigger one, make a cathedral, right? Make accessories for the cathedral, make the windows for the cathedral, make the bell for the cathedral. So due to the way of making bells and the machines for the cathedral, they develop metallurgy, because they have to cast the bell, they had to cast mechanism to make it ring, etc., every hour. So those kind of technologies, some musical instruments, okay, doors, etc. So all the building activities were also done by monks. So the technology is developed by them. In those years, in England especially, we see a lot of monks who are who are doing engineering. One of them is blast furnace, so making steel. They found how to make steel better. Not to make sword, but in more bigger quantities. Another guy, Hazarfen Ahmet Çelebi'yi biliyorsunuz. Another guy, again the monk in the church, tried to fly. Actually, he flew 200 meters and broke both his feet in landing. So he was disabled for the rest of his life. But in the writing he says the cause of his failure is to forget to put the tail. He didn't put the tail in the wings at the back, so but he tried it around year 1010. These numbers are big numbers, 1010, and I'm just skipping to 13th century, 200 years. At the beginning of 13th century, there were a lot of Latin translations of the main works of the Arabic and Greek. Greek and Latin is different. Greek and Arabic text. Those texts were available in monasteries and churches. Monasteries and churches were the center of knowledge. The rest was illiterate. People who are thinking more than praying get together, and their places are called as universities. So they study more science than Bible, but they are still religious. So what we see is early universities are always connected to the church. For example, in order to open a department, they had to get permission from the church. So they were organizationally connected to the church, so they were like a branch of the church. What we see in Western universities when we visit today, there is always a church, which is probably not used today, church in the university. Because all the funding, all the money, and the permissions came from the church. And later, in 15th century, we start to see a lot of conflict between church and the universities. Sometimes church closes the university. For example, in France, church was angry at the university because they were doing something they didn't want. They closed it. And even king couldn't open it because the church was above the king. King couldn't do anything. University was closed, and I think I forgot where it was, either in France or Britain. In France, I think they started free schools because the university was closed. They started free lectures for the public, the scholars, and people were coming into free courses without a degree, because giving degree was in the hand of the church. So, but free course institutions were popped up. So people tried to understand by themselves, only by taking courses, without going into university, because university was closed. Later, in those conflict years, kings started their own secular colleges. It's much later. Secular colleges who are not connected to the church. But at the beginning, those were the church people, monasteries, etc. Therefore, we see a lot of scholars, philosophers, thinkers were also priests, because that's how they grow up. First half of the 14th century get a lot of important scientific work, largely in the framework of Aristotle's scientific writings, such as Buridan and Oresme started to reinterpret elements of Aristotle's mechanics. Then there was an Oxford calculators in Britain in 13 something something something. In the 13th century, thinkers, almost all associated with Merton College at Oxford, they were making tables, calculators. They started mathematics, but later moved into engineering. They tried to quantify every physical and observable characteristics like heat, force, color, density, light. So it created an environment for people to study math and engineering and physics. Therefore, Newton was from Britain, not from Italy, because physics and math were getting popular in Britain. One reason could be the church and king was relatively separated in Britain due to some personal reasons. Because, when was it? Because divorce is prohibited in Catholic religion, but the king wanted to divorce. The Pope said, you can't divorce. King said, okay, I will make my own sect. Then he established Anglican Church, where it is like Catholic, but divorce is free. So you can divorce. I don't know which king was it. Can somebody look at it? Origin of Anglican Church. So Britain and Germany was more peasant and rich people separation. It was very significant. So the rebellions started always from the north. Rebellions of the workers, rebellions of the peasants. Kaç?
Henry VIII.
8. Henry. Tarihi ne?
1600'lü
1600'ler. Oxford'dan birazcık sonra. Then there was a Black Death, veba. In Black Death, significant population of Europe is wiped. Also in Ottoman too, Anatolia too. Because of the Black Death, workers died, and rich people realized that they need workforce, they need people. So labor market increased the wages are increased after that, and civil rights movements also increased because they demanded their rights. They demanded their rights because the work was expensive. There was an inflation, etc. Around 1453, Byzantium fell. At the same time, printing press was invented. So that two things, fall of Constantinople and the invention of the print on the same day and the same date, defines a transition in the civilization. That started the scientific revolution. There was a Southern Renaissance in Italy, Florence, etc. So art, etc. And there was a Northern Renaissance in Germany, today's Germany, later in Britain. Those include Protestant Reformation, Catholic Counter-Reformation, Finding America by Christopher Columbus, Fall of Constantinople, all the same years. Rediscovery of Aristotle and the scholastic period indicated large social and political changes. So those are the critical times. Northern Renaissance is interesting. German, French, English, and Benelux, and also Polish. Not Italy. These guys are more because Italy has the Pope. They are themselves. More villages, and in the Florence and Milano, they have art, etc. They are rich, so they don't pay attention. But the masses in Germany and France and Polish and in the Poland were under pressure of the church, under pressure of the Vatican. Therefore, there wasn't Vatican, there was Rome. Therefore, they rebelled. So those kind of rebellion movements and different thinking created a nice place for Protestant Reformation. So it started from the religion. The first time when Copernicus said the earth was rotating around the sun, it didn't make much sense. So nobody cared. They said it's foolish. Don't worry about it. And also, he was influenced from the Arabic script. Then Italy was also improving. Toscana, etc., Milano. It is basically in painting, architecture, philosophy, and exploration. Exploration was interesting because they were sea people. So they were able to make ships that is big enough to go away. And one thing that invented in Renaissance is the perspective projection, perspective pictures. Before Renaissance, the pictures were two-dimensional. After the Renaissance, it was three-dimensional. Leonardo da Vinci and Donatelli proposed that kind of perspective imaging. So realistic-looking images and paintings were started to be produced after that day. Before, it was all miniatures and two-dimensional things. Galilei was again around 1500 from Pisa, He is considered as a father of scientific method. And again, I say he first tried to study medicine. His father was trying to get him in a school to make more money, but accidentally he attended a math class in the University of Pisa, and he liked it, and he switched the main course from medicine to mathematics. Yeah. 1580. His father says physicians were making higher income, so be a doctor. And he didn't. Copernicus says there was a center with the sun, and there were circles. Galileo said, no, it is not circles, it is ellipses, which is more correct. This is interesting, and this is so important because it contradicts with the Bible. Therefore, in the old system, Ptolemaic system, you have the Earth, Venus, Mercury, Jupiter, Mars, and one of the orbit, you have Sun. Okay, the old books, many old books have this. Also, religious books. All religious books build on top of this knowledge. In 1650, Galileo was an important guy, and he said heliocentrism was the case. So there was an Inquisition courts of church who were punishing people because they were talking too much. Not only Galileo, but many other people. They were hanging Protestants, and they were hanging different thinkers, etc. So if you think differently, you are dead. So since Galileo is an important person, scientist, he was before the court, and there was a case, and he was convicted. At the same time, around, the number is very vague, that is the correct explanation, but around 100,009 million executions was given for women who were considered to be witches. Düşünebiliyor musunuz? Cadı diye 100 bin ila 9 milyon arasındaki kadını yakıyorlar Avrupa'da. Böyle bir dönem. Ve bu dönem 1500'lerin sonu. Yani işte bizim Yavuz Sultan Süleyman'dan sonraki dönemler falan. Church, Roman Catholic Church didn't like it, and this was a painting from depicting Inquisition court. There is a judge standing, right? Judge is standing, but the priest was sitting, so actual owner, and the Chris was at the top. Later, he was convicted to home sentence, but he kept writing. In the final years, he wrote a book like this. You can take it and give it to AI and read it, original. There is also translation. So if you are interested, you can download it from internet and read it. Final years of Galileo. So Universities and printing press helped spread the spirit of the age through the France and Low Countries, Benelux, and Holy Roman Empire, and Scandinavia, and finally Britain by late 16th century. Writers and humanists such as Rabelais, Pierre de Ronsard, Erasmus were greatly influenced by Italian Renaissance model and were part of the same intellectual movement. Then there was political movements starting by Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King, it is Martin Luther, and Calvin. They questioned religious doctrine and they started Calvinism and Protestantism. What Martin Luther did was translate Bible into German and said all people will read it. And also Ptolemy and Galen was found, not always much everyday observation. So people found problems with the Galenic view of anatomy. What Galen said, there was a black blood, white blood, and good spirit, bad spirit, they come together and form the human body, etc. So it is mathematical explanation of human body, not physiological explanation. Newton well, Vesalius, Copernicus, and then later Newton's Principia Mathematica was key moments in scientific revolution of Europe. Later names like Halley, Hooke, Huygens, Brahe, Kepler, Leibniz, Pascal, they were the scientists of those years, 1600s. And in philosophy, Bacon, Brown, Descartes, and Hobbes, these were the famous people. The first, I'm going to stop. The first scientific journal in 1665 was this, Royal Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society. So through the societies, science expanded. But still there was a king, church, so there was a friction. The works of Newton, Descartes, Pascal, Leibniz, they were printed, as well as the second generation, Franklin, Euler, Lomonosov, D'Alembert. There was a famous encyclopedia, Diderot's Encyclopedia, published between 1751 and 1772, 20 years. The first encyclopedia of the world. It was so big. I'm going to talk about it later. The impact of the process was not limited to science and technology, but also philosophy, like Kant, Immanuel Kant, Hume, Adam Smith, Voltaire. So those were the thinkers. Those were going together with the science. And the case was like this. People were getting together, reading the books, and others were listening. So people were getting together, talking and discussing, etc. I'm going to show you something for fun. I watched it later. History nerede ya? Okay. This is the
Let me show you why UE Germany
this
is the
an
one.
example of English
Career
language.
success. Over 90% of UE grads land jobs within 1 year. So your future is
Working across Roch Bob, one of only a handful of people who continue to speak a dialect of English known as Middle English. You no doubt thought that it had died out sometime in the 15th century, but there are still a small number of speakers, and we're incredibly lucky because he rarely gives interviews, and this took months to set up. I hope you enjoy it. Subtitles are available. We're delighted that you've accepted this interview. Thanks for coming today. Heil Bevel. Could you tell the viewers who you are? My name is Bob, and you speak Middle English. Ik kan het English only. It is Utlandisch folk that clappen it Middle English. Peradventure, thou thinkest that our language is dead as a doornail. But there ben some men that ben of good comfort that yet read it and speken it until this day. How is it that now, in 2025, you still speak a variety of English that was spoken in the year 1400? For Sotha, he was nourished in a solitaire commune, where dwelten asunder from the general company of folk, and hadden but smaller esses of this newer geese of living. Really? Where was that? In South London. I imagine that you work on a farm or something like that? Nee. Me thinketh thou hast it all wrong, kin fellow. I raise not livestock, ne plough not the veldes, I meal not grain, ne fix.
If you're interested, there is more. So this was the case. People were reading, and as I just shown you, the language was kind of different, although you can sort of understand writings today. There was a little bit different pronunciation. And let me stop here because the topic was gonna change. If you have any questions, let me know. Let me stop the recording.